Welcome to Arizona Now and Then. I'm Ron Bellis. Well, we're going to talk about how to get fit, optimizing aerobic fitness. My guest is Joe Wozniak. Joe's been with us before, and we're going to talk again a little bit about what brought him to this situation and why he knows a little bit about what he's talking about. Because Joe's had a very interesting experience, not something we'd all would want to go through, but he's come out stronger than he was before. Joe, good to have you with us again.
Thanks, Ron. For having me back.
As again, you know, you have been here before, but I do want to go through again what you've gone through, your background. I know you're active in running and stuff, and then something happened to you about 8, 9 years ago. Would you kind of go through that so we can get the foundation and go on and talk about how we can help people get fit?
Sure. Well, Ron, back in early 80s, I was starting to get fit, and in fact, I started working with Dr. Art Mullen, and he's gotten a lot of people out there running. And in 1983, I did my first marathon in Honolulu. That was really one of the great places to go. And
that's a great place to start it.
Yeah, it sure was. And what I noticed is that I really wasn't as fast as other people. And lo and behold, in 1984, I was diagnosed with a very rare form of muscular dystrophy. It's very mild. So in my 30s, to be diagnosed with a rare form of muscular dystrophy was kind of a surprise.
A little scary.
There were times when you sit back and you say, gee, why me? But that didn't last very long. We started to take a look at what we really can contribute.
And you said we. Okay, who's we?
Well, that was really a mistake on my part. It was really a reflection on my part to take a look and say, what really could I contribute? At first, I had the normal reaction of, well, no, the doctors are not right, and this can't be so. And fortunately, Dr. Mullen really encouraged me to go and do some fitness activities, because there were a couple of doctors who said, we're not sure that you really ought to be running anymore because it may do some long-term effect. So ever since that time, I was looking for, what was the right level of fitness, what would work best for me. And then a couple of years ago, I found that there were available on the market these heart rate monitoring equipment. And so for over 2.5 years, I've actually been recording every one of my exercise sessions. And so I have the data on what my exercise sessions were. And the data was very fascinating. It was not understandable at first because I didn't really follow a lot what was in the books and things like that, or at least the way I was looking at it at the time. And so in the last year or so, I've started working with some other people, and we noticed there was a different pattern. And the reason why we're here today is to share what we've noticed, and because we think it will help a lot of people out there.
Okay. Now you say, almost 3 years ago, you found out that there are a lot of ways to monitor your heart and everything else that you're going to be doing. So we're talking very high-tech stuff.
Yes.
In between the time when you found out you had muscular dystrophy, albeit mild still, nevertheless, obviously in some respects devastating, but obviously you've come through it pretty good and continue to do so. Did you do a lot of exercising still? I mean, did you really get even more involved in it, or what?
Well, some people would think so, because back in 1988, I did a 70-mile triathlon, which was a 1.2-mile swim in Swirl Lake and 56 miles on the bike in Fountain Hills, and then a 13-mile run.
Oh, yeah, they've shown that on TV here a lot.
And I've also done the El Tour de Tucson, which is over a 100-mile bike ride. I did that in 1990.
So this, of course, again, is after you were diagnosed.
Yes, after I was diagnosed, yes. It took me 12 hours to do the El Tour de Tucson, which was quite a long time to be out there. So what I found is that I didn't have the strength to be fast, but I was very persistent and could actually finish.
Yeah. Okay. All right, you got into this high-tech stuff, and you're able to monitor. Is it mostly just your heart, or is it other things? What else are you monitoring?
Well, in this case, we're really talking about the heart rate. Okay. Before I get into that, what I'd like to say to the people who are listening, that we're really talking about anybody who's been thinking about starting a fitness program, or people who are triathletes, and in particular coaches and trainers. I think they'll find it very interesting what we have to share with them tonight. Okay. So
this is really for anybody, even those that are active now, but also anybody that's thinking about getting active. So
yes,
hey, anybody with ears, listen.
Because I think what we'll find, what they'll hear tonight is some of the misconception that people have had about exercising, and a lot of people had some bad experience with exercising and getting burned out, and I think they might find one of the reasons why they've gotten burned out.
Oh, okay. Yeah, good. Let's get into it then.
Okay.
All right.
So the starting place is the device that we actually record the heart rate. Okay. Now this particular transmitter actually gets right against the ribs, against the skin, And this actually has a radio transmitter that transmits your heart rate every 5 seconds to the watch. And it actually stores the data every 5 seconds and stores about 2.5 hours worth of data. And then when we finish the exercise, we go lay this on the computer device, and the data gets transferred into the computer. And so what you're going to see tonight is some of the printouts from the computer and some of the analysis that we've done.
Okay, good.
Okay?
And again, the exercising you're doing, the workouts are varied. It's running, it's
biking,
everything. Okay.
Yes,
So anything you can do physically, then you can basically do this.
Yes.
Okay.
Now, what I'd like to point out is that this particular device is fairly expensive. It's over $500. And so most people would not invest in the one that record their heart rate. But there are heart rate monitors that people can buy anywhere from $100 to $250. Okay. So because the prices are coming down, they're going to find that they're much more affordable, and certainly what I'm saying is that it's probably a good idea to get one if they want to enjoy their exercise.
Yeah. And again, if they're really serious about training and things, other than just trying to get in shape.
Even if they're not serious about doing 10Ks, if they're really interested in enjoying their workout, because what we're finding is that people are doing too high intensity of workouts. And one way of actually controlling your intensity is having a device that says, hey, you're going too fast.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
And again, the printout's going to show that.
Yes.
Is that, as you've been able to be, I understand you're training somebody now to be involved in a long distance running and things like this. Is that something I guess we just want to run out and do it as fast as we can and tend to burn ourselves out? That's mental. It's not only physical, but it becomes a mental situation. So what I'm reading here is that if you've got monitoring equipment, it'll give you more of a positive mental outlook on what's going on. So you say, hey, I'm doing this wrong, let me do it right, and then I'll feel better physically and mentally.
Yes, that is correct.
Okay, good.
Okay.
Yeah, that certainly helps. Okay, go.
So the starting place is to understand your heart rate. Okay, there are certain things to understand that when you wake up in the morning before you actually lift your head off the pillow, that's called your waking heart rate. And so I've actually recorded for several years my waking heart rate, because athletes know that that's one of the ways of knowing whether you're overtraining or not, or whether you're getting sick or not. That will change. Okay, so that's part of the data that I collected in conjunction with my exercise data.
Is it always better to have a lower heart rate? I know you're not a doctor, but you're involved in the training of this, and you're learning some of the aspects of it. Is it always better as a trainer if you're training somebody or somebody that's actually training yourself in training? Is it always better to keep that heart rate down, or are there times that it is better? Because we hear about, hey, you got to get your heart rate up to get rid of the fat in your vessels and veins and things.
Well, what we find is that the absolute heart rate is not as important as the fact that when you do start to exercise and do it properly, over a period of time, your resting heart rate will come down lower. Okay. As an example,
if you only get too low, then you're dead.
That's right.
Okay.
But you actually get pretty fit where your heart is actually pumping more per stroke, so it's becoming very efficient. So to give you some idea, my friend that I'm training to do the marathon, she's 57 years old, and she has high blood pressure. And she's hoping to be able to exercise so she can get off her medications. When she started out 2 years ago, her resting heart rate was 85 beats a minute. When I tested her a couple weeks ago, her standing heart rate was 50 beats a minute. Okay, so she's really gotten into, her heart is very, very efficient.
That's dramatic.
Yes, it is, very dramatic.
Well, again, exercise in a lot of ways can do so much good for you. And I guess more and more doctors are realizing that get them out of the hospital a bit faster, start them, get them moving around. And,
yes, that is correct.
And exercising, getting the muscles going is going to be a great positive impact on you.
That is correct.
Obviously, this is certainly an example of that. Okay, so you've got this thing strapped to you. Oh, let me get back to the dollars first.
Sure.
Even $100 is a lot of money.
Yes.
Are there ways to monitor yourself without spending a lot of money? I mean, about a watch and, this kind of stuff, or is that? Really
well, what we're going to show today is a way that you can actually monitor the intensity of your workout without having a heart rate monitor, okay? It's obviously not, a heart rate monitor is better, but for the people who can't afford it, we at least have something better than what typically has been recommended.
Okay, let's go ahead.
So what we're going to talk about is actually two different ways of which I've collected data, okay? One is I have designed a particular treadmill workout for me that is this, so you're going to see some data for the same identical workout over a period of time. Okay, now that's one test. Now, everybody can't do my workout, and some people need to go faster, some people need to go slower. But the other test that we're going to talk about, which applies to everybody, is what we call a Conn-Conny test, where you gradually increase your heart rate on a treadmill or at the track, and you gradually increase, and the computer records your speed. So that when we'll do that, we'll see the analysis of some of those data, okay? But we're going to start off with an example of what you can accomplish in 7 weeks, okay?
All right.
So for the average person, this data is my data, okay?
Right.
So what you see here, along here is the heart rate, and this is over time. So
Well, how long a period of time?
this is 45-minute workout,
Okay, all right.
okay? And I'm going on the treadmill 4 miles an hour. That's about 15 minutes per mile, okay? And you see my heart rate kind of comes up and levels out, and then we finish the exercise and comes down. So this is back on March 21st of this year. This is after about a 3-month layoff. I'm sure there's people out there who've laid off from time to time, and we won't mention any names, Ron, but but everybody knows how that is.
I've been busy.
So the computer calculated that my average heart rate for that workout was 145 beats a minute. Okay?
Average for the 45
For the
minutes.
45
That's
minutes.
up, down, and okay.
Yes, okay. Now, the thing that's important to notice about this particular chart is that at the end, you'll notice that the heart rate drops off very, very quickly, okay? So one of the recommendations for the people at home is that when you're now finishing your workout, if you want to try and feel your pulse and calculate your pulse, that's probably not a very good time because it's dropping so rapidly.
Yeah, as soon as you stop, it drops.
It drops very quickly. So if you are using that particular method, chances are the reading you're getting is very low, and maybe up to 10 to 15 beats a minute low, okay? So what we're going to see as we go along, that there's a much better place over here, and that is it kind of lines out around 100 beats a minute. Okay, so we'll come up with a criteria before the show's over to help them guide themselves, okay? So this is where I started. And then 7 weeks later, what I've done is I've taken and we've put on the same chart the one for March 21st and then the one for May 15th, which is 7 weeks later.
Okay.
So it's the same identical treadmill workout. I went the same speed. And what you notice is there's a line that's at 129 beats a minute. Okay, so we went 16 beats a minute less over the same speed, the same distance, and the same time. So you can see that if you now start to get trained, your heart will now pump more efficiently.
Is the last line on there the drop-off? I mean, that's even more dramatic.
Yes, and that's what happens as you get more fit, is that your drop-off comes much faster down to 100, okay? So in the first case, it took about 11 minutes for my heart rate to come down to 100. In the second case, it was less than 2 minutes. So that was one of the things that says, hey, I was much fitter 7 weeks later.
Right.
Okay?
And you expect that, of course, but whatever you were doing was working.
Yes.
Okay.
So what I found is that 11 minutes for your heart rate to come down to 100 is a fairly intense workout. In fact, I found that it actually elevated my waking heart rate in the morning. So the guideline I've kind of come up with, if you're looking for a nice medium intensity workout, is to have your heart rate come down to 100 in less than 5 minutes. When you start getting above 5 and 10, it starts to become a fairly intense workout.
But is that always bad? I mean, say you want an intense workout, you're in a hurry to get into shape, or is that bad for you physically?
Let's take two categories.
Okay.
Let's take a person who's interested in getting in shape as fast as possible. What we find is people would like to increase that intensity. The problem is that they then have not recovered for the next day to be able to do the same thing.
Okay.
So you've got to balance.
Yeah.
You've got to balance that recovery, okay? Now, there are some cases for triathletes and some high intensity that they do mix some very high intensity workouts with recovery workouts. But we're not going to get into those today. This is for people who just want to exercise every day and get into shape.
Right.
But you need to be careful of your intensity.
Okay.
Now we're going to switch to the this Conn-Conny test, where this is a test that I use for everyone else. I use it for myself, but this is the one that's standard. And it was developed by an Italian man named Conn-Conny, and he had found that when you increased your heart rate up, he measured heart rate, and he also measured blood samples at the time. And he found that there's a certain point where your lactic acid builds up and you can't really run as efficiently or exercise as efficiently. So he's correlated you'll see in the graph what we call the deflection point, where your lactic acid starts to increase very quickly. Okay? So the way the tests work is, in this case, we gradually increase the speed of the treadmill. As you can see, the heart rate kind of follows a straight line. And down here, the bars represent about every 5/100ths of a mile, or about 80 meters. Okay? And so this data itself just shows you how the test is done. The computer then analyzes the data, and we're going to see how that is on this next chart.
A reminder that lactic acid is not something, now that's a something that comes out of your muscles while you're working.
Yes. When you're working them very hard, in fact, there's a term for that, they call it anaerobic.
Right.
Okay? The sprinters run very anaerobic. Marathoners have to stay aerobic, otherwise they won't be able to make all 26 miles.
Right.
Okay? So there are some events that are aerobic and anaerobic, and then there's ones that are all aerobic. So we're concentrating today on aerobic. Okay? So what the computer then is, it draws a line with heart rate up here, and it calculates the speed. So what you notice is that those
Speed of what?
the speed of the treadmill.
Okay. Right. How fast you're going to run then?
How
Or
fast?
jog.
So this was the test that we just showed. This was the results. And what you notice is all the x's follow the straight line up until toward the end, and then it veers off to the right. Because you can see that x over there sticking way out there to the right. And so that's where the lactic acid is starting to build up. Okay. Now this happens to be a very fit person. This is a person who can run less than 8 minutes per mile. And they can do a 10K very, very quickly. Okay. Right around the 40-minute mark. Okay. So, so this is what's documented in the books, is you'll find very fit people. Now, when I started to look at the results, I found that it isn't this way for everybody. And this is what's significant for today, is to notice that it isn't that way for everybody. Okay. So what I'm going to show you next is some of the data from other people that I have. Okay. Now, we're going to step away from the Conn-Connie test for the moment. Now, this particular chart is 11 different people that I've tested. It isn't necessarily statistically any particular way. It's just the ones that I picked as an example. Okay, there's actually 5 different kinds of people that I've put on this chart. Down here, the first 3 happens to be people who haven't exercised in some cases years. Okay, the next group, which now over here on the right, is how fast they're going at their fitness level, based on the Conn-Connie test. The next group is people who've been exercising maybe once or twice a week, okay, maybe aerobics class. The thing that surprised me was that they weren't that much faster.
Right.
Okay. The next group is people who are exercising more routine, and then these people over here have been exercising for quite a long time, a number of years. As you can see, they're going faster and faster. And the last person over here, going 11 miles an hour, okay, is an ultramarathoner. He runs 150 miles a week. Okay. So for the people, these last 3 people will show up on the Conn-Connie test right along that straight line, very much following that pattern. Okay. So if they want to train aerobically, that means that they need to stay below that deflection point if they want to stay aerobic.
Okay.
So that's the guideline for some of the people. Now, what I'm going to show you next is what happens, what does the chart look like for people who haven't exercised in a while. And what was curious about that was, I'm sure you maybe have noticed when you start to exercise that it isn't very comfortable.
Right. Other than the muscle pain. You mean it's other things too.
The muscle pain and whatever. And I happen to have a friend of mine who's hadn't exercised in years, and she says, Joe, you know, I hate jogging. It was like, I hate it. Yeah. And so she let me test her. And what's interesting is that you notice it follows the X's for a while, but instead of moving to the right of the line, it moves above the line. Okay. So this is what I'm finding is for the average person who has not been doing 10Ks and whatever, theirs deviates the other way. Now,
that's obviously bad. More lactic acid is what's this showing.
No, it doesn't show that at all. What this is showing is that if you increase the speed of the treadmill just a little bit, their heart rate goes up much faster.
Okay.
So now what's interesting here, this person went all the way to 160 beats a minute, and they were walking. So this is the good news for people, is that when you're first starting off, walking can get your heart rate up very, very high, and it's not needed. So when you're now exercising at the beginning, you can walk and get your heart rate as fast as you need to go. And so that's pretty exciting for people to know. And no wonder she hated jogging. If she jogged, it probably went to 180 beats a minute.
Yeah.
Okay?
Plus it was painful.
It was painful. That is exactly right. Okay. Now, one of the other common things that happens, this particular person is in a little bit better shape. Now, you notice it's a little closer to the line, still above the line. And this is one of the other things that typically, I've had at least 2 people tell me this, that when they're starting off, they'll start off jogging for all 10 to 15 minutes, and they'll start to work up from there. They'll start adding time. But when they're finished with that 10 to 15 minutes, their muscles get tight and they get sore. And this was an example of one of those friends of mine who, when he would jog, his heart rate would get way high. Okay. So what we found was that his fitness level is really around 125 beats a minute. So what we did was we said, okay, now let's do an experiment. Let's set up the heart rate monitor and let's have you do a workout at the right level, between 125 and 135, which is right about where your fitness level is. Okay. And what was surprising is that not only was this person able to do all 45 minutes, but they said it was very enjoyable, okay, and they didn't get sore afterwards, and they
still got the proper exercise.
And they got the proper exercise.
And this is the results of that.
This is his workout, 45 minutes between 125 and 135. Okay, so this is an example now how the heart rate monitor can help you. It beeps when you go too low, so you got to speed up, and it beeps when you go too fast, so you have to slow down. And so in this case, he did all 45 minutes walking with just a few jogs, about less than 10% of the time. Okay? So this is typically what people will experience when they know exactly where they should be. Now, I knew where to set the limits because I tested him. Now, for our audience, for the people out in the audience who can't necessarily be tested and they want to have a heart rate monitor or check themselves manually, this particular person, it took about 4 minutes and 50 seconds for a heart rate to come down to 100, which is exactly where I was shooting for, less than 5 minutes, to give him the right intensity.
So this is going to be 2 things. One, he's training properly within his limits.
Yes.
And he's going to feel better about it and not be upset mentally and physically.
Yes.
He's not going to be negative about the experience.
Yes.
So you're going to, in the long run, it's going to be great.
And he'll improve faster.
Yeah. Speaking of 5 minutes, believe it or not, we got less than 5 minutes.
Oh, we got less than 5. Okay. Well, thanks for the warning.
Yeah, I want to let you know so you can pace yourself.
Sure.
Put the monitor on so we'll know.
Okay. So I'll skip those 2 for now, okay? What I wanted to show was for now the people who are not starting out, people who may be training for a marathon or whatever, okay? What I've done was, this happens to be my friend who's training for a marathon. What we did was we said, let's record what your long run is. This happens to be a 10-mile run, okay? What you'll notice is the zigzags up and down. This is before we told her to set the alarms on the, okay? Right. And what we found was that after 8 miles, she had to walk, okay? Now, I'm going to go a little fast here, but the key is that she couldn't do the whole workout, okay?
At that rate?
At that rate.
That speed, right?
At that speed.
Okay.
Now, the very next week, what we did, we said, okay, let's let the computer control your workout. The average heart rate is identical to this workout, so the average is the same, but you'll notice no ups and downs. It stays right in the limits. She was able to go all 11 miles at 30 seconds a mile faster. So that's pretty exciting for people who are training for 10Ks and long runs. Not only can they, if they control those peaks and valleys, they can actually stay a lot more consistent and get a better workout. And she enjoyed it. See, that's where the enjoyment comes in.
That really is remarkable, because you want to talk about efficiency in training,
yes,
not alone just the efficiency of your body, but the fact that you're really teaching somebody how they should run.
Yes.
That's remarkable.
Okay.
Again, high tech, it can be helpful again.
Now, for triathletes and whatever, there are endurance workouts, speed workouts, and strength workouts. So there are different kinds of workouts. So I don't want to be misled that this is the only kind of workout, but how it can help on the endurance workouts. Now, here's what's also exciting for the same person. Okay, we did 4 tests. These are the Concani tests now, where you can do the same test and find out, have you improved? Okay, this was last December. She was a little over 3.8 miles an hour. This was in August when she started her training. this is in September, and this is in October. So we're now talking about 8-week period. You can see every 4 weeks we've tested, and she's now shown improvement. So the methodology allows people to get that feedback, and that's why I say I think that coaches and trainers would be interested to give their athletes that incentive to be able to say, hey, we are in fact improving.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Other than just feeling that you are, you can actually see it.
You can actually see it. Mm-hmm.
And of course, when you're talking statistics, when they're timing you, that is a statistic that you're interested in.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay. Got about 2 minutes.
Okay. Thank
Go
you for
ahead.
So now we're going to go back to some of the myths. Okay.
Okay. Yeah. Let's finish up with the myths. How we can get rid of those and do better.
Okay. So one of the things I found, now this is the same chart that I had before, but I've added some data. Now, this line here is the speed at which the people were at their fitness level, okay? And the bar represents their heart rate at which they were at that level. And down here at the bottom are the ages of people. So I have people from 18 all the way up to 57. I've got so what we want to show people is that that the heart rate versus your age, because a lot of people say you need to have a heart rate based on your age. That is not true, okay, from the data that I've collected. What's more significant is what your fitness level is, and it's more individual. So at least the monitoring can now help you get your own individual, and rather than trying to read some chart, because if you read the chart, you may be too low, you may be too high. And I think the other...
Okay, we've got about a minute, so let's finish up with the concepts we're talking about some of the myths and some of the things we can do real quick, less than a minute, how we can start and do it right. 2 things you'd suggest.
Okay. 2 things I would suggest. If they can afford a heart rate monitor, they should get one. And they should be taking a look at how long their heart rate comes down to 100 to judge their intensity. If it's over 5 minutes, they probably ought to back off. If it's under 3 minutes, they might increase a little bit. Okay, so that would be the guideline I would give them. This really applies where I think it's really important is when you now have high school track people. When they first start, you have people at all different fitness levels, and you go out and do the laps at the same speed. You know that somebody's dying out there going too fast, and the other people are going too slow. So this would really help them if they start to take a look at their heart rate recovery and start to judge their speed based on that.
In other words, don't push yourself, too. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Good, Joe. Thank you very much for being with me. Joe Wozniak, we talked about optimizing aerobic fitness, how you can be better fit and train better. Thanks for being with us tonight with Arizona Now and Then. Stay tuned for more next week. Thank you. Good night. Thank you, Rob. Thank you. Good evening and welcome to Arizona Now and Then. I'm your host, Ron Bellis. Now, what would you do if you happened to find out of the blue that you had some kind of a debilitating disease? Well, what if it was a muscular dystrophy? My guest tonight is Joe Wozniak, and this is what happened to him about 7, 8 years ago. And obviously a bit of a surprise, but like most things in life, those people that are successful rise above their surroundings. And Joe is a great inspiration to a lot of people. We're going to be talking about his story. And Joe, welcome. Good to have you with us. It's always great to have somebody that that has maybe had a struggle in their life, and they've said, hey, the heck with that, I'm going forward. And that's really exactly what this is. And we're going to get in a little bit about that aspect of it as far as being an inspiring individual to others. But first, let's find out a little bit about you and what took place and how you found out about this and what you've been doing.
Okay, Ron. Well, Ron, back in early 80s, I started doing a little bit of running. And then about 1983, I found out I had high cholesterol. And my friend Dr. Art Mullen got me into running and eating right. And gee, in about a 6-month period, I found I was doing my first marathon in Honolulu in 1983.
That was a good place to start.
It was definitely. And I've gone back several times after that. And that was really quite an accomplishment to be able to train in 6 months to do a marathon. Well, then in early 1985, I went skiing and I wiped out the ligaments in my left knee. I had to have the ligaments reconstructed, and I really wasn't able to run for quite a while. So during 1980, that would have been 1980.
Was it? Or 85?
You're right, 1984. 1984. I was diagnosed with muscular dystrophy, and at that time I had been running a lot, and I noticed I wasn't improving very much. So it was just a natural curiosity of seeing other people who started after I did, starting to improve, and I wasn't really improving. So one day I was at my foot doctor, and I said to him, he says, you know, I noticed that my left leg isn't quite as strong as my right leg, and quite a few months back he had mentioned my left leg was shorter, and I said, you know, is that because it's shorter? And he looked at me and he looked at my legs and he says, you know, he says, it may be, he says, but let's have the muscles checked first. So I went and I had a blood test and electromyocardiograms and biopsies done where they take some samples of my muscles, and found out that I had muscular dystrophy, a very rare form called FSH, and it doesn't really affect my heart and lungs, but my extremities. So fortunately I'm not going to really die of it, but it was really quite a surprise at age about 36 to find out that I had muscular dystrophy.
How did you feel, other than being surprised, obviously? I mean, that, you know, I mean, especially when you think, gee, with muscular dystrophy, like you said, most people think, gee, that's such a debilitating disease, you could die from it at an early age.
Yeah. But, I kind of noticed there were several stages that I went through. That first day, I had gone to it was a specialist who had diagnosed me, and on my way home I went to see Dr. Art Mullen, who's a friend of mine, just to tell him what happened. At that time he couldn't see me, but I noticed that I was kind of sad at that time about it, the whole thing. And you know, to be honest with you, I was very sad. I went home and thought about it a while, you know, and it wasn't too long after a while I realized that, hey, something was going to give. And my first initial reaction was that I went and talked to Dr. Art, and we said, you know, maybe this isn't really true. Maybe, because the first recommendation was that I shouldn't run. If my pattern of dystrophy follows the other, because there's 40 different kinds of dystrophy, if it follows the other patterns, then maybe I shouldn't run. And the two doctors recommended that I not do as much as I have. And at least Dr. Art says, you know, I'm not sure that that's right. And so I made a decision at that time initially I was going to continue run, and I was going to prove the doctors wrong. So I was determined that no, this wasn't going to get me down.
Well,
so
already,
that was,
you know, to start right there, I mean, that's a huge step forward, I would guess, you know, because to think that there'd be a lot of people, I'm not going to say most, but I'm sure there's a lot of people that would say, good grief, you know, why me, Lord, kind of a thing, you know, and woe is me and the whole bit, and sit and be a big sourpuss about it. But you said, the heck with this, you know, I'm going to prove you wrong, I'm better than that. And that's a very positive step, as I see, right off the start.
Well, it certainly got me going for a couple of years, okay? And I was very fortunate right after that period in time. I was taking some personal development seminars, and I realized that I could actually even take it a step further, and not necessarily to be self-righteous about it, but I actually could form partnerships with people And at that point in time, I was able to go back to my doctors and say, hey, listen, what can we learn from this experience? And for me, that was much more, that's a happier way of being than to try and just, try and prove people wrong all the time.
Yeah.
So that's how we got kind of started on this whole thing.
Yeah. What, how did that affect, you said for a couple of years this helped buoy you up. What were you doing during those 2 years? Are you running? Were you doing other things with Dr. Mullen? I know he's a big runner, big fan of that.
Well, I was diagnosed in August of '84. In '85, I wiped out the ligaments in my left knee.
So already you were skiing and stuff, so you weren't doing everything you were supposed to,
right.
Some doctors, right?
I'm not sure that I'm going to go back downhill skiing again, but what was interesting was during that recovery from the surgery, I couldn't run, I couldn't bike, so I started going to the pool swimming. Now that was really, looking back, that was really kind of giggles, because I found myself, I couldn't even make it 25-yard pool without feeling I was going to halfway drown. And that was during the recovery period. About 8 weeks later, I found that I did my first the swim leg of a triathlon in Firebird Lake, which was a half-a-mile swim. So I was able to swim. I didn't do the bike or the run. I was part of a team at that time. So I started, that kind of got me hooked. At that time, I wasn't quite sure that I would ever be able to do the biking and the running and the swimming.
So already, after a couple of years, you're already thinking of being a triathlete? Is that what you're saying?
Well, that's what happened. It was like, okay, I was, I couldn't run or bike at that time, so I started swimming, and a friend of mine said, well, why don't we be on this team? And I said, well, okay, all right, I'll do that. And so that's what happened. And so
oh yeah, it just sounds natural to me. Yeah, but
but I found some interesting things. It was quite interesting. So most people dread the swim leg of the triathlon, and what I found was that's the easiest leg. Because when I was being tested for muscular dystrophy, they had this machine where they were testing the strength of my arms. And they couldn't test my arm. My arms were so weak that they couldn't test me on the machine.
It wouldn't register.
Wouldn't register, but yet I could go and do a half-mile swim in open water, okay? So that says that, hey, if Joe Wozniak can do it with muscles that are that weak, hey, anybody could. So what I found was it was just really a misconception about the swim. And, well, and you start to think about it was there's no hills on the swim, right?
Yeah. A lot of resistance. It's not like wind.
So that happened, I think, in June of '85. And by September of '85 is when I actually did my first triathlon in Firebird Lake and did all 3 legs. Okay, that was about 4 or 5 months later, and that's when I started my recovery. Where I couldn't quite run very fast, but I was just starting to get back.
So you're saying about a year and a half after you were diagnosed?
Just about a year. Just about a year and a month.
Year and a month. After you were diagnosed having muscular dystrophy?
Yes, I did my first triathlon.
Then you did a triathlon?
Yes.
Well, again, I mean, that's obviously got to be very inspiring to a lot of people, not just those that may have a disease that can slow them down or potentially slow them down, but just to people in general. You mentioned teams. What was this about? How did this start?
Well, it was, that was in 1985. By 1988, I was doing a seminar called High Performance, where you broke up into teams, and you created a project of interest of the team, of the group. And so it turned out this particular project we decided on, it was that I would do the Fountain Mountain long course triathlon, which is 1.2 mile swim in Swallow Lake, and then 56 miles in the hills of Fountain Hill, and then a 13-mile run up there in the hills.
Sure, anybody with muscular dystrophy can do that, right?
Anybody can do that, that's right. At least with my type, I think.
Sure.
But we didn't stop there. It wasn't about just doing the triathlon. We created a project where people pledged money all over the country to the Phoenix Youth at Risk program. So during that triathlon, and during that training period, that's what really inspired me, was that every training mile that I did, I trained in order to be able to finish, and the more miles that I did, the more money we would raise. And so we raised over $7,500 for the Phoenix Youth at Risk program.
That's great.
Back in 1988.
Oh, that's great. Obviously, as you're going to touch the lives of a lot of people in that kind of a race. I mean, there are a lot of athletes, a lot of people who get involved in any one of those sort of things, not just the triathlete, you know, the triathlon itself, but as you're training and stuff, what are some of the people saying to you? I mean, you know, there's got to be a situation where somebody who's, maybe they think they're a jock, whether they're male or female, and they go, what's going on here? This guy's beating me. He's going on a triathlon. You know, that's a little unnerving, I think, as somebody that's, you know, that thinks that they're an athlete to start with.
Well, one of the things that happened along the way was that I started noticing that people came up to me and thanked me for being out there and had said, you know, I'm out here running because I've seen you do this, and I know that I don't have anywhere near the disability that you have, and you've really inspired me to do this. As time went on, and this happened more often, I found that it didn't have to be kind of an accidental thing, that when I go to a triathlon or to a run, I'm there really to inspire people, and that, I kind of take it on as my job to inspire people.
Yeah, giving something back, so to speak.
Yeah, to encourage people. And one of my friends is Rose Stewart, and she did her first triathlon at 68. Last year, she and I did a triathlon down in Casa Grande. Now, here's a lady who's now 74 years old. She had diagnosed with some breast cancer, had surgery, and 2 weeks after she finished her surgery, she did this triathlon with me. Yeah. So, you know, I find that, you know, she's now inspiring me, and it's really kind of a mutual benefit kind of a thing. So it's really been quite a fun over the years, inspiring people.
Well, it sounds like it. One thing that I want to show everybody, a couple of your trophies that you've won. It's the Kathy Miller Award, right?
That's correct.
The young lady that was, if I remember right, was hit by a car, Scottsdale girl?
Yes, that's correct.
And she was a runner?
Yes.
And things have been named after her, and we have that. Why don't you turn around toward the camera?
Sure.
And
yeah, this was an award in 1985. This is when I was recovering from the knee surgery, and the Phoenix 10K, I was awarded the Most Courageous Athlete Award. And at that time, that was a very kind of a moving experience for me, Ron, because at that time I really wasn't running. I was kind of shuffling along, and I remember kind of being emotional because at that time I didn't know whether I'd ever run again. So that was really kind of a special kind of award for me.
And the next one, we're just about done, but we want to get these two trophies in so people see them.
This is in 1990, after I did that 70-mile triathlon up in Fountain Hills in 1988. In 1990, I trained for the El Tour de Tucson, which is normally a 106 to 110-mile bike ride. Well, that year I got off course and I did 120. It took me over 11 hours, but that was my my latest accomplishment.
That's great. Well, Joe, we really appreciate you being here. I'm sorry we don't have more time, but we congratulate you. Glad that we had you here tonight, and hope you come back to do some more stuff, and then we'll talk about it again. And gosh, you know, I mean, talk about an inspiration. There it is. If you need one, you've got them. They're around. Joe's one of them. Stick around. We'll have more Arizona Now and Then right after this. Stay tuned.
When you've been doing a job a lot of years, you learn some useful tricks. How to do it right, how to do it safely. Being new on the job means keeping your eyes open, learning the rules, not taking shortcuts. And if you are injured on the job, workers' compensation can help. It's been helping for 75 years. But wouldn't it be better to do the job right? Keep safe and make my job easier.
We are back. Welcome to Arizona Now and Then. I'm your host, Ron Bellis. My guest for this segment of the show is Greg Merrick. He is, and I'll get this right, the Redevelopment Program Manager of the City of Glendale, a highfalutin title, and we're going to find out what that's all about because there's a lot of things happening in Glendale. Greg, good to have you with us.
Thanks, Ron.
Explain, first of all, what your job and responsibility with the city is in redevelopment.
Well, like you said, the title's kind of more of a technical title, but basically I manage the downtown redevelopment program for the city, and I've been involved in trying to bring in new business and revitalize the downtown area.
Well, you're doing your job well then, because it's really changed in the last few years for the better, I'm sure, in the people I've talked to and as you drive down through it.
Thank you. Yes, it's a lot's been happening in the last few years, but we've actually been at it for 10 years. It takes a lot of a lot of time to set that foundation, but we've been making a lot of progress.
We opened up, and we'll get to it a little later, some drawings of some artist sketches about what's going on and what's called the magnetic mile. Explain that. We've had some city officials in Glendale on before talking about what's going on that magnetic mile, and there's really a lot of fun things.
Sure. Well, the magnetic mile actually refers to Glendale Avenue, which is the namesake of our community. And as the major street through the downtown area, we wanted to make it into a destination area and give it a kind of a little catchy name. And so we brainstormed and came up with the magnetic mile, thinking that perhaps businesses would be attracted to Glendale Avenue like a magnet.
You guys are.
Just very. So what we did a couple of years ago, we got all the citizens in Glendale together who wanted to participate and had a brainstorming session over a weekend where we came up with ideas of the type of businesses people would like to see come into the downtown area and along Glendale Avenue.
What were some of the fruits of that weekend?
Well, the fruits of that weekend, people really wanted to see specialty shops and a continuation of that. They wanted to see new residential housing in the downtown area.
Oh, really?
And also, I guess most importantly, they really wanted to beautify Glendale Avenue, because as you come in through Glendale from 43rd to 51st Avenue, the city spent $4.5 million landscaping that area in front of the car dealerships. But when you get to 51st Avenue, I'm the first to admit it's not the most attractive area until you get closer to the core area in downtown. So we wanted to spend some time and some money trying to fix that area up.
Yeah, we've got the graphic up on the screen now.
Yes, well,
or had it anyway.
Yeah, well, the graphic they're showing is we came up with some concepts of what we'd like to do to landscape Glendale Avenue. Add some brick crosswalks, add new trees, shade trees, add new street lights.
You're not going to put bricks down the middle of the road, are you?
No, but
good for you.
but add the bricks on the crosswalk.
That's
so
great.
kind of shows that area a little bit differently.
Sure.
And by doing that, coming up with the concept, we're now trying to do the hard part, and that's find the money to actually put in the improvements.
Now, where do you expect to get that money? From taxes or from other businesses in the area? What's the plan on that?
Well, we're looking at a couple of ways. The city every year receives some federal money through the Community Development Block Grant Program. So we have applied for $400,000 for next year to do some of the improvements. And we are beginning some discussions with downtown property owners to form an improvement district where they would actually tax themselves to put in some of the improvements. And so we're looking at a combination of sources there.
I want to get back to the idea of this, maybe some housing downtown area. What specifically did some of the ideas come up with that? What did you have in mind?
Well, they didn't really have any real specific locations or ideas in mind, but they wanted to bring more people into the downtown because that makes it a more vibrant
and safer,
area,
really.
and safer area to be in, sure. So we do have a fair amount of single-family homes in downtown now. For example, 2 blocks or 3 blocks north of Murphy Park, right in the heart of downtown, it's now a historic district where there are some homes that were built in the 1920s. It's on the National Register as a historic district. So we've been working with those property owners to try and help them fix up their homes, make it into almost like a mini Encanto Park area.
Right, yeah, if anybody's been around that area in Phoenix, there are some beautiful homes there that it's really been well developed and restructured. It's just gorgeous. And boy, to have something like that in the Glendale area too, that'd be great.
Oh, absolutely. We are working on a project right now where the old police building was located in the downtown area is now a vacant block. And we have 2 developers interested in putting a retirement housing project on that particular block. And so we're looking at that, which would be our first multifamily project in the downtown area.
The you mentioned the specialty shops. There are a lot of them already. I assume you're trying to get even more.
Absolutely. The last 2 or 3 years, we've really seen an increase in antique shops and other specialty shops.
Lots of antique shops.
Lots. In fact, we're the antique capital of Arizona right now. We're getting a lot of people.
Sun City? No, I'm just kidding.
Close. But we're getting a lot of people for the first time coming to downtown Glendale from East Mesa. We have an antique walk the 3rd Thursday of each month, and there are actually buses that are coming from the East Mesa area that come to downtown, drop people off.
You don't drink wine on the streets, though, do you?
Punch. They have fruit punch in the stores. They have entertainment on the streets. And as a matter of fact, in the last 2 years, we've had approximately 47 new businesses have opened up in the downtown area.
Gee.
So that's been, we're really starting to see vacancy rates go down, and it's really starting to take on a character of its own.
Are you planning on, you mentioned one of the, you know, the old police block, but any other areas where you're trying to build new buildings, or just kind of stay with the old look and just kind of refurbish it? Or a mix, or what?
Well, it's really a mix. For example, in the heart of downtown where Murphy Park is, a number of those buildings still date back from the late 1890s, early 1900s. So we're trying to work with those property owners to try to bring those buildings to look like they did back then. There are some areas between, say, 51st Avenue and 55th Avenue where some of those older buildings that were built in the 50s could be demolished to make room for newer buildings and newer uses.
Still, I guess the old question is that the old, is it the big old building?
The old beet sugar factory.
That's right. The old sugar factory. What's going to happen? Any real plans, or is it still just talk?
Well, it's talk and dreaming. We get a lot of dreamers who come in who like to do something with that building. It was built in 1907 to...
it's a neat looking
Yeah, it is. It's to process beet sugar from the beets that were grown in the area, which did not prove to be very successful. I've been in the building. I've been on to this 5 stories tall, and you get fantastic views of the entire valley from on top. So people have had ideas of making it into offices, retail uses, a restaurant on top. It just takes money.
Yeah. You're talking about that. Have you ever been to Trolley Square in Salt Lake City?
No, I've never been there.
It's a similar kind of a thing. It was an old trolley destination back in the little after the turn of the century, and it's a very vibrant area. So there's some precedent in the West for something like that to be done. So let's hope we can do something like that.
As a matter of fact, even tomorrow we're meeting with a financial developer type who's very interested in that building, and that's what we're trying to find right now, is someone who has the financial resources to do something with their building, because it would take a fair amount of money to fix it up.
What kind of money are we talking about? You mentioned the $400,000 from the from federal grants. Other projects that you are familiar with off the top of your head, or?
Well, we
just guessing. Hey, go ahead, guess.
Yeah. Actually, money is very, very tight to come with. Timing is everything. When people compare us sometimes to downtown Tempe and wondering questions, why aren't you as far along as downtown Tempe took? Well, like I said, timing is everything. When Tempe was doing their redevelopment, they were spending $3 to $5 million a year on their downtown improvements. That money is just not available anymore, and we spend, if we're lucky, $400,000 to $500,000 in any particular year. Most of that's coming from federal money. Some of it does come from some creative financing resources we have, as far as if it's a retail use, we can use some of the sales tax that project generates and try to help finance a project that way.
Yeah. I would imagine, obviously, you got 47 new businesses in the last few years, so that's going to bring in some tax revenue too. That's a great help.
Sure, it really does. And the merchants are really banding together now. They're promoting themselves. They're advertising. We have bicycle patrols, police bicycle patrols on around the downtown area. The Downtown Development Corporation has a trolley running in downtown, which I think is unique for us. We also have a horse-drawn carriage or tours that are given through the downtown area, where that's an individual's business, and he does tours in the downtown area.
Well, the way it's been developed, it's really the amphitheater and everything is just. Matter of fact, we've done a show out there with.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah. So we're very excited about it and very involved in what's going on. At least we try to be. As you look this thing over in your own mind's eye, and dream for a minute. What are you looking at for the next couple of years? What do you think is going to happen, and what's still maybe in the dreams, not even on the drawing board yet?
Well, I think the big thing is to really create that environment where people want to come and really, we have our little saying to shop, walk, and eat in an earlier place and time, and trying to create that environment. So I see just trying to put in a lot more landscaping, really beautify the area, which we found has been bringing in more business. And I see a lot more specialty shops coming in that kind of complement what we have with the antique shops.
The trolley and the horse-drawn carriages, that is unique.
Yes.
Whose idea was that?
Actually, the horse-drawn carriage was an entrepreneur. It was just some individual who decided that there was a market for doing that. He's received some financial assistance from the merchants in downtown. They think it's really a draw. The trolley was the idea of the merchants themselves through their Downtown Development Corporation. and found that I think it was ferry people around at different locations, that more people would come in and shop, and that's been proven to be effective.
Yeah. You've brought a little thing, if you don't mind showing us.
Sure.
A little walk around. What's going on downtown. I hope we can get that on camera and get it in a little bit. I'm not sure.
Well, this is basically a walking map that shows
Get it over here with Kevin.
that shows the area that is where most of the antique shops are and our specialty shops, and it shows people where they can walk as a walking tour and visit the various shops. And it shows the trolley locations on there, and they printed 30,000 of these maps that are distributed valley-wide to tell people our story, and that we do have a lot of antiques and specialty shops here.
Yeah, this is kind of neat. It really is. It's just got, you know, it's got all the buildings and everything. Murphy Park, whole bit. What kind of activities are planned, like concerts and things like that? Is that getting involved from the city, or are you trying to bring in some entrepreneurs to do that too, or a combination again?
Well, it's kind of a combination. We always look at things as a partnership with the private sector. The city recreation department puts on Thursday evening concerts in the amphitheater. On every Saturday, the merchants through the Downtown Development Corporation have a Saturday market, and that has anywhere from 70 to 120 vendors who display arts and crafts every Saturday in the park.
Oh, great. So you got Thursday night concerts, Saturday market. So there's a lot of things going on in Glendale, and if you haven't been out in a while, give it a try. Greg, thanks for being with us.
Thanks for asking me.
Okay, good deal. Also like to thank Joe Wozniak for being with us tonight, and thank you for being with us on Arizona Now and Then. Be with us again next week. Thanks and good night.